So today we're going to talk about the negation and contrapositive of a statement. So let's first look at our statement. Our statement says that if X is a dog, then X is an animal. And as you learned in the earlier videos, that the whole statement can be written in the form of PX, where PX implies QX. Right? So what do we mean when we say negation of a statement? Well, in mathematics, first let's introduce the sign. How do you want to show other people that it's a negation? Well, you write this little symbol in front of the px. So what I just wrote here means the negation of px. It will be same for qx. Qx notation will look like this, and this will mean the negation of qx. So let's talk about what negation means. So our px statement is that if x is a dog, the negation of that statement will be that X is not a dog, right? So let's actually write that down. X is not a dog. And the negation of QX will be that X is not an animal. So that's the negation. That's like, you can see negation as the opposite of the statement. So in this case, we say that if X is a dog, then the negation will be that, well, X is not a dog. So a statement that makes the PX statement untrue. So now let's look at contrapositive. First, I want to mention something, right? So in the previous video, the one before that, I mentioned that although PX implies QX, must be true. But if you reverse it, which is the converse, if you write it in the form of like this, QX implies QX might not be true. So if this is true, if you reverse the order, then it might not be true anymore, which is gonna work in this case. So let's look at our statement. Our statement is if X is a dog, then X is an animal, right? So PX, X is a dog implies that QX, X is an animal. But if you reverse it, following statement will be untrue, because if you reverse it, it will be that if X is an animal, then X is a dog, which is obviously untrue because there's so many animals. If this is animal, it might not be dog, it might be cat or lions, tigers, whatever. So PX implies QX must be true. But if you reverse it, write it in the form of the converse, which is QX implies PX, it might not be true. But that's why I want to introduce the idea of contrapositive. So the contrapositive of PX implies QX. So let's write that. Contrapositive would be negation of QX implies negation of PX. So these two statements, I want to highlight it. These two statements are equivalents. They are equal to each other. Although that, like, if I write it just in PX implies just in QX implies PX with no negation sign in front of it, it will be false. But if I flip the order and negate both statements, then the new statement, which is the contrapositive, will be equivalent to the original statement, which is PX implies QX. In this case, our original statement is if X is a dog, then X is an animal, right? So its contrapositive would be that we first need to reverse the order of the statement. Then we need to take the negation of the both statement, which will be that, which let's actually write it down. So the negation of QX will be that if X is not an animal, then X is not a dog, which is obviously true, right? Therefore, I just proved that PX implies QX is equivalent to the contrapositive of itself, which is the negation of QX implies negation of PX. If X is not an animal, then X is not a dog. Makes sense, because if X is not an animal, then X certainly cannot be dog, because dog must be part of animal. And if it's not an animal in the first place, then it cannot be dog, which makes sense. That, so just want to introduce that these two are equivalents, the idea of contrapositive. and it will be really useful later on when we try to prove different kind of proof, which I will talk about in the example videos later coming on. And thanks for watching. Hope you learned something.